Captain Jake Morrison walked slowly across the bridge of his ship. The UES Retribution was the biggest and most powerful warship that humans had ever built. It moved through space like a ghost, hidden from enemy eyes by special systems that made it almost invisible. The bridge was dark and quiet. Only the soft blue lights from the control panels lit up the faces of his crew. Morrison had been fighting wars for 20 years. His face showed the lines and scars of many battles. He had fought on Mars when the rebels tried to break free from Earth. He had been there when the Centauri colonies were attacked by alien forces, but this mission was different. This time, Earth had given him a weapon that could change everything. Lieutenant Kate Phillips sat at her station, watching the communication systems. She was young but smart, and Morrison trusted her completely. Her fingers moved quickly over the buttons and screens as signals came in from across the galaxy. "Captain," she said, turning to face him, "we are getting emergency calls from Epsilon Colony. The Zephyrian Empire has surrounded the whole star system with their war fleet." Morrison's hands formed fists. The Zephyrians were some of the most dangerous aliens in the galaxy. They had been conquering planets for hundreds of years. Their ships were made of special crystal that could take huge amounts of damage. Their weapons could turn entire worlds into melted rock and ash. "How many ships do they have there?" Morrison asked. 47 warships, sir. All of them are big ones. The colonists do not have any way to fight back." Morrison looked at the star map on the main screen. Epsilon Colony was home to 50,000 human families. They had gone there to start new lives, to farm and build homes far from the crowded cities of Earth. They had no weapons, no soldiers, no way to protect themselves. Commander Alex Turner was sitting at the navigation station. He was Morrison's oldest friend and had served with him for 15 years. Turner looked up from his controls with worry in his eyes. "Captain, how long will it take us to get there?" Morrison asked. "If we push the engines as hard as they can go, 18 hours, Turner replied. "But sir, the colonists will not last that long. The Zephyrians do not take prisoners. They will kill everyone and take the planet." Morrison nodded. He knew Turner was right. The Zephyrians had done this before. They would attack the colony from space until nothing was left alive. Then they would send their own people to live there. But Morrison had something the Zephyrians had never seen before. The Retribution was not just another human warship. It carried secrets that even most people on Earth did not know about. The ship had been built in hidden factories in the asteroid belts. The best scientists and engineers from all of human space had worked on it for 10 years. "Alex, prepare the Phantom Protocol," Morrison said quietly. Turner's face went pale. The Phantom Protocol was something they had only tested in computer simulations. No one knew if it would really work in a real battle. It was so dangerous that it could destroy their own ship if something went wrong. "Sir, are you sure? We have never used it in real combat." "The colonists do not have time for us to think of another plan," Morrison said. "Set our course for the Epsilon system, maximum speed." "Yes, sir," Turner said. His hands shook a little as he started entering the commands. Morrison walked to the center of the bridge and pressed a button on his command chair. His voice went out to every part of the huge ship. "All crew, this is the captain. We are going to battle to save Epsilon Colony. The enemy has many more ships than us, but we have something they do not expect. Today we will show the galaxy what humans can do when we are pushed too far. Prepare for the Phantom Protocol." Throughout the ship, the crew began their work. The engine room's chief engineer Lisa Grant watched her instruments carefully. The Retribution had engines that other humans had never seen. They could make the ship move in ways that seemed impossible. Grant had been working on these engines for 5 years. She understood them better than anyone else, but even she was not completely sure how they worked. The engines could make the ship exist in 2 places at the same time. They could make it move through space without actually moving. They could make it become like a shadow that could not be touched. "Engineering to bridge," Grant's voice came through the speakers. "The reality displacement engines are ready, Captain. All systems show green lights." "Good work, Lisa," Morrison replied. At the weapons station, Officer Dan Cooper was checking the ship's guns. But these were not normal weapons. The Retribution carried quantum disruptors, weapons that could break apart the tiny pieces that made up atoms. When these weapons hit something, they did not just destroy it. They made it stop existing completely. Cooper had been trained to use these weapons, but he had never fired them at a real target. The power they carried scared him. With one shot, he could erase an entire enemy ship from reality forever. "Weapons systems ready, Captain," Cooper reported. Morrison looked around at his crew. These men and women were the best that humanity had to offer. They had volunteered for this mission knowing they might not come back, but they also knew that if they succeeded, they could save not just Epsilon Colony, but maybe all of human space. The Retribution began to change as it moved through space. Strange lights started to flow along its hull like water. The ship began to flicker, sometimes looking solid and sometimes looking like it was made of smoke. It was becoming something between a real object and a ghost. Morrison watched the stars ahead of them. In 18 hours they would reach Epsilon Colony. The Zephyrians would be waiting with their crystal ships and terrible weapons, but they had never faced anything like the Retribution. The human warship continued its journey through the darkness of space, carrying hope for the colonists and a new kind of fear for humanity's enemies. Admiral Zexathara stood on the command deck of his massive warship, the Crystal Fire. The alien looked like a giant insect, with 4 arms and eyes that could see in many directions at once. His body was covered in hard, shiny plates that looked like green metal. He had been fighting wars for the Zephyrian Empire for over 30 years. The Crystal Fire was the biggest ship in the Zephyrian fleet. It was 3 miles long and made entirely of living crystal that could heal itself when damaged. The ship's weapons could destroy entire cities with one blast. Around it, 46 other Zephyrian warships floated in perfect formation, blocking all ways in and out of the Epsilon star system. Below them, the human colony world spun slowly in space. Zexathara could see the lights of their cities and farms. Soon all of those lights would go dark forever. The Empire needed this world for its rich metals and perfect climate. The humans living there were just in the way. "Admiral," called Communications Officer Velkin from his station. Velkin was younger than Zexathara but just as dedicated to the Empire. His voice had a worried sound that made Zexathara turn to look at him. "What is it?" Zexathara asked. "Sir, our sensors are picking up something strange at the edge of the star system." "Be more specific, what kind of strange?" Velkin looked at his instruments again, checking the numbers twice. "Sir, our scanning systems show nothing there. Empty space. But our gravity detectors say something very big is moving toward us, something huge." Zexathara's mouth parts clicked together, a sound Zephyrians made when they were thinking hard. Throughout the galaxy, stories had been spreading about a new human warship. Other alien races whispered about it in fear. They said entire fleets had disappeared after meeting this ship. They said it could do impossible things. Most aliens, including Zexathara, thought these stories were just talk. Humans were weak. Their ships were small and their weapons were not very powerful. The Zephyrian Empire had been crushing human colonies for years without much trouble. But now, something was making his instruments act in ways they never had before. Far away on the bridge of the Retribution, Captain Morrison watched his crew prepare for the coming battle. The ship was still invisible to enemy sensors, hidden by technology that bent light and energy around it like water flowing around a rock. Chief Engineer Lisa Grant sat at her control station, watching dozens of screens filled with numbers and graphs. The reality displacement engines were working perfectly, keeping the ship existing in a space between normal reality and somewhere else entirely. "Captain," Grant said, "the displacement field is stable. We are running at 70% power. The Zephyrians cannot see us or touch us while we stay in this state." Morrison nodded. "How long can we keep this up?" "As long as we need to, sir. The engines are designed to run this way for days if necessary." At the weapons station, Dan Cooper was running tests on the quantum disruptors. These weapons were so powerful that they had to be kept in special containers when not being used. The energy they contained could tear holes in space itself. "Weapons Officer Cooper, report," Morrison said. "All quantum disruptors are ready to fire, Captain. The The void generators are also online and waiting for your command. The void generators were the most secret weapon on the ship. They could create areas of complete nothingness, spaces where even atoms could not exist. Anything caught in a void field would simply stop being real. The technology was so dangerous that only 3 people on the ship knew how it really worked. "Sir," Lieutenant Phillips called from her station, "I am detecting the Zephyrian fleet. 47 ships in standard attack formation. Their flagship is the Crystal Fire, Admiral Zexithara's command ship." Morrison had heard of Zexithara. The alien commander was famous for destroying human colonies. He never left any survivors. He was cruel even by Zephyrian standards. "Can they detect us yet?" Morrison asked. "No, sir. Their sensors show nothing. But they seem to be getting nervous about something." On the Crystal Fire, tension was growing by the minute. More and more of the crew were reporting strange readings from their instruments. Some said they could feel something watching them, even though nothing was there. "Admiral," the chief science officer reported, "our computers are having trouble processing the sensor data. They keep showing us readings that should be impossible." "What kind of impossible readings?" "Energy signatures that suggest a ship larger than our entire fleet, but completely invisible. Space-time distortions that should only happen near black holes. And sir, some of our crew are reporting dreams about a shadow ship that hunts Zephyrian fleets." Zexithara's eyes widened. Dreams were important to Zephyrians. They believed dreams could show the future. If his crew was having the same dreams, it meant something terrible was coming. "Send a message to all ships," Zexithara ordered. "Increase sensor sweeps to maximum power, prepare all weapons. Something is out there and I want to find it before it finds us." Throughout the Zephyrian fleet, crews rushed to their battle stations. Weapons powered up with crackling energy. Shield generators hummed to life. Crystal hulls began to glow with protective fields. But their enemy was already there, watching them from a place their science could not reach. Morrison studied the enemy formation on his tactical display. The Zephyrians were good fighters, but they were used to enemies they could see and understand. Today they would face something completely new. "Open a channel to the enemy fleet," Morrison commanded. Phillips looked surprised. "Sir, should we reveal ourselves?" "Not reveal. Terrify." Morrison's voice was cold as space itself. "It is time to give Admiral Zexithara something new to have nightmares about." The Retribution began to change. Energy flowed through its hull, like lightning. The space around it started to bend and twist. Reality itself was becoming a weapon in human hands. In the depths of the ship, machines that had never been built before hummed with power that had never been used before. Humanity had spent 10 years building this moment, and now it was time to show the galaxy what they had created. The message came from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Every Zephyrian ship in the fleet heard it on all their communication channels. The voice was calm and cold, like death itself speaking from the darkness of space. "Zephyrian fleet, this is Captain Morrison of the United Earthship Retribution. You have 10 minutes to leave this star system. This is your only warning." Admiral Zexithara felt his blood turn cold. The voice seemed to come from inside his own head as much as from the speakers around him. He looked at his instruments, but they still showed nothing. No ship, no energy signatures, nothing but empty space. "Impossible," Zexithara whispered. Then he began to laugh. It was a harsh clicking sound that echoed through the bridge of the Crystal Fire. "Humans, always so full of big words. Velkan, scan for their ship. One vessel cannot threaten 47 warships." "Communications officer." Velkan's hand shook as he worked his controls. "Sir, I am scanning everything. Every frequency, every type of energy we know about. There is nothing there. But the message is still coming through." "Keep looking," Zexithara ordered. "No ship can be completely invisible." But even as he said it, Zexithara felt doubt creeping into his mind. The stories other aliens told about the human ghost ship were starting to seem less like lies and more like warnings. On the bridge of the Retribution, Captain Morrison watched a countdown timer on his main screen. 9 minutes and 30 seconds remained. Around him, his crew worked quietly at their stations. They all knew what would happen when the timer reached 0. "Admiral Zexathera?" Morrison's voice went out across space again. "I know you can hear me. Your crystal hulls are strong, but they will not protect you from what is coming." Zexathera's confidence cracked like ice. How did the human know his name? How could their ship send messages without being detected? The Admiral had fought hundreds of battles, but he had never faced an enemy he could not see. "Morrison," Zexathera transmitted back, "show yourself. Fight with honor if you dare." The human's laughter came back through the speakers, and it was a sound that made every Zephyrian on every ship feel afraid. "Honor? There is no honor in what we have become. We tried talking to you peacefully. We tried making deals. You answered by killing our people and burning our worlds. Now we answer with something you cannot fight." Chief Engineer Lisa Grant looked up from her control station. Strange energy readings were flowing across her screens like water. "Captain, the reality anchors are working. Space and time around the Zephyrian ships are starting to break down. Their vessels are beginning to exist in multiple times at once." Morrison could see it on his tactical display. The enemy ships were flickering, like broken lights. Some appeared as faint shadows. Others seemed to stretch across impossible distances. The Zephyrians were experiencing their ships being in the past, present, and future all at the same time. "What is happening to us?" screamed the navigation officer aboard the Crystal Fire. His instruments were showing that the ship was in 17 different places at once. "Admiral, our position readings make no sense." Zexathera stared at his own screens in growing horror. The numbers and readings were impossible. According to his instruments, the Crystal Fire was moving backward through time while also jumping forward into the future. Parts of his ship existed yesterday while other parts existed tomorrow. "Morrison," Zexathera transmitted, his voice filled with fear now instead of anger. "What have you done to us?" "5 minutes remaining, Admiral," came the cold reply. "Your sensors are telling you something that your mind does not want to believe. We are not just invisible. We exist in a state that your science cannot understand." Throughout the Zephyrian fleet, panic was spreading like fire. Ship after ship reported that their crystal hulls were beginning to change. The living crystal that made their vessels so strong was becoming unstable. Some parts were turning back into ordinary rock. Other parts were becoming something that had never existed before. Engineer Kexaval aboard the Crystal Fire ran to his admiral with terror in his multiple eyes. "Sir, our hull is breaking down at the level of atoms. The crystal structure is falling apart. If this continues, the ship will collapse." Zexathera looked out at his fleet and saw ships that were no longer solid. They flickered between being real and being dreams. Some vessels appeared to be made of light. Others looked like they were made of darkness itself. "How is this possible?" Zexathera whispered. Morrison's voice answered as if he had heard the question. "We learned something from every world you destroyed, Admiral. Every human you killed taught us that talking and hoping for peace would never work. So we built something that goes beyond normal war. This ship does not just carry weapons, it carries the will of every human who died because of your empire." On the Retribution, Weapons Officer Dan Cooper watched his instruments with amazement and fear. "Captain, the quantum disruptors are responding to the enemy's fear. Their terror is actually making our weapons more powerful." Morrison nodded. The Retribution was not just a machine. It was something that fed on the determination of its crew and the fear of its enemies. The more afraid the Zephyrians became, the more real and powerful the human ship became. 3 minutes, Admiral," Morrison announced. "After that, I will show you exactly why we named this ship Retribution." Across the Zephyrian fleet, ships began to move without orders from their captains. The reality distortions were affecting their navigation systems. Some vessels started flying in circles. Others began moving toward the star at the center of the system. "All ships, maintain formation," Zexathera ordered desperately. But his own voice sounded strange, like it was coming from very far away. The countdown timer on Morrison's screen showed 2 minutes and 15 seconds remaining. Soon, the galaxy would learn what happened when humanity decided to stop being victims and become something else entirely. Fear spread through the Zephyrian fleet like poison in water. Ship after ship reported systems breaking down in ways that should have been impossible. The crystal hulls that had protected them in 1,000 battles were changing into something else entirely. On the bridge of the Crystal Fire, Engineer Kexaval ran from station to station checking readings that made no sense. "Admiral," he screamed, "our hull is not just breaking down. The atoms themselves are forgetting how to be crystal. Some parts are becoming gas. Other parts are becoming pure energy." Admiral Zexathara stared at his instruments in complete terror. His ship, which had been solid and real just minutes before, was now flickering between different states of matter. Sometimes it was metal. Sometimes it was liquid. Sometimes it seemed to be made of light itself. "What kind of weapon can do this?" Zexathara whispered. All around the fleet, other ships were experiencing the same impossible changes. The warship Thunder of Stars was becoming transparent, like glass. The battle cruiser Deathbringer was splitting into multiple versions of itself, each one existing in a different moment of time. Captain Morrison watched the chaos from the bridge of the Retribution. The countdown timer on his screen showed 30 seconds remaining. It was time to end this. "Bring us into normal space," Morrison ordered. "Let them see what they are facing." Chief Engineer Lisa Grant's hands moved across her controls. "Disabling reality displacement in 3, 2, 1. The Retribution appeared in normal space like a nightmare coming to life. But it was not just big, it was impossible. The ship seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. Its hull stretched in directions that should not have existed. Weapon systems covered its surface like the scales of some giant beast, and each weapon looked like it could destroy planets. The space around the Retribution rippled and bent like water. Stars behind it appeared twisted and wrong. The ship was so massive that it had its own gravity field, pulling light toward it and bending it into strange patterns. "By all the gods of space," whispered Velkin aboard the Crystal Fire. "What have the humans built?" Admiral Zexathara could not speak. He could only stare at the monster that had appeared before his fleet. The ship was larger than some moons. Its weapons were unlike anything in the known galaxy, but worst of all, it seemed alive. The hull pulsed like a heartbeat. The weapons moved like eyes looking for targets. Morrison's voice came across all frequencies, and now it seemed to come from the ship itself. "Admiral Zexathara, now you see what you are facing. This vessel is not just a warship. It is the will of humanity made real through science you cannot understand." The truth began to dawn on the Zephyrian commander. This was not just another human ship. This was something that existed beyond the normal rules of physics. It was a weapon that used the laws of reality as ammunition. "Every human who died in your wars is part of this ship," Morrison continued. "Every colony you destroyed, every child you killed, every family you broke apart. Their desire for justice powers this vessel. Their anger gives it strength. Their memories of your cruelty make it grow larger and more terrible." Weapons Officer Dan Cooper looked at his targeting systems. "Captain, quantum disruptors are fully charged and locked onto the enemy flagship. One shot will remove it from existence permanently." Morrison nodded. The quantum disruptors did not just destroy things. They erased them from reality so completely that they had never existed at all. Anyone hit by these weapons would be forgotten by the universe itself. "Admiral," Morrison transmitted one final time, "you have seen what we have become. Your fleet is already dying from just being near us. Your ships are forgetting how to exist. Your crews are experiencing time in ways that will drive them mad. You have one choice left." Zexathara looked around his bridge. Half of his crew had already collapsed, their minds unable to process the impossible things they were seeing. His ship's computer was displaying error messages in languages that had never been created. His weapons were powering down on their own as if they were afraid to fire. "What choice?" Zexathara asked, though he already knew the answer. "Leave. Take your fleet and go back to your empire. Tell them what you have seen here. Tell them that humanity has changed. We are not the same species you have been hunting. We have become something else. Something you cannot fight." The Zephyrian. Admiral looked at the impossible ship floating before him. Around it, space itself seemed to be afraid. Stars dimmed when their light touched its hull. Even the darkness of space seemed to pull away from it. For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Zexithara gave an order he had never thought he would give. All ships retreat immediately. Full speed to the jump points. Do not engage the enemy. Do not look back. But his fleet was already moving. The ships that could still move were fleeing as fast as their engines could carry them. Those that were too damaged by the reality distortions were abandoned by their crews, who escaped in small pods rather than stay near the human monster. Within minutes, the space around Epsilon Colony was empty, except for the Retribution and a few drifting pieces of abandoned Zephyrian ships. Morrison watched the enemy flee and felt no satisfaction, only sadness for what humanity had been forced to become. "Signal the colony," he ordered. "Tell them they are safe, and send a message to Earth Command. Let them know that Project Nightfall has succeeded. The galaxy now knows what happens when you push humanity too far." The Zephyrian fleet scattered across space like leaves blown by a storm. 47 warships that had come to destroy a human colony were now running for their lives. They fled so fast that some ships damaged their own engines trying to escape. Admiral Zexithara sat in his command chair aboard the Crystal Fire, shaking with fear he had never felt before. His ship was finally returning to normal, but the memory of what he had seen would stay with him forever. The impossible human vessel that existed in multiple dimensions. The weapons that could erase things from reality itself. The voice that seemed to speak from the darkness between stars. "Communications Officer Velkan," Zexithara said, his voice barely a whisper. "Send a message to all Zephyrian forces in this sector of space." "What should the message say, Admiral?" Zexithara closed his eyes and tried to find words for something that could not be described. "Tell them to avoid all human space. Tell them the humans have built something that goes beyond war itself. Tell them we are no longer fighting people who can be beaten." The message went out across Zephyrian communication networks. Within hours it reached every ship, every base, every world in the Empire. The proud Zephyrian military, which had conquered hundreds of worlds, learned that there was something in space they could not fight. Other alien races heard the message too. The Corvan Republic, the Stellar Federation, the Free Worlds Alliance. All of them had been enemies of humanity at one time or another. All of them had thought humans were weak and easy to defeat. But now they heard a Zephyrian admiral, one of their most famous warriors, begging his own people to stay away from human space. The message was clear. Something had changed. Something that made even the Zephyrian Empire afraid. On Epsilon Colony, the human settlers watched the sky with wonder and relief. The Zephyrian ships that had been ready to destroy their world were gone. In their place was a massive ship that seemed to shimmer between being real and being a dream. Governor Linda Hayes stood on the balcony of the Colonial Administration Building, looking up at their savior. She had served in the Earth military before coming to Epsilon, but she had never seen anything like the ship floating above them. "It is beautiful and terrible at the same time," she said to her aide, Marcus Webb. "I can feel the power it carries even from down here." Webb nodded. He had been trying to contact the ship, but his communications equipment could not lock onto it. The vessel seemed to exist on frequencies that normal technology could not reach. "Governor," Webb said, "I am getting reports from other colonies. The Zephyrians are retreating from human space everywhere, not just here. Everywhere." Hayes smiled for the first time in weeks. "How many ships?" "Over 300 Zephyrian vessels have fled from human territory in the last 6 hours. Some of them were in the middle of attacking other colonies. They just stopped fighting and ran away." On the bridge of the Retribution, Captain Morrison received the same reports. Lieutenant Kate Phillips was monitoring communications from across human space. "Captain," Phillips said, "we are getting surrender messages from 6 different Zephyrian fleets. They are asking for terms. They want to know what they have to do to avoid meeting us in battle." Morrison looked at the reports on his screen. The Retribution had not fired a single shot, but its mere appearance had ended multiple wars. Zephyrian forces that had been winning battles just hours before were now begging for peace. "What about other alien races?" Morrison asked. "The Corvan Republic has sent a diplomatic message asking to restart peace talks." The Stellar Federation is offering to return all captured human worlds. Even the Free Worlds Alliance wants to discuss new trade agreements. Chief Engineer Lisa Grant looked up from her station with amazement in her eyes. Sir, the experimental systems worked beyond anything we hoped for. We proved that human science, when driven by the need to survive, can overcome any challenge. Morrison walked to the main viewing screen and looked out at the stars. For 20 years, humanity had been running from stronger enemies. They had lost worlds, ships, and millions of lives. They had been seen as weak and easy targets by every alien race in the galaxy. But all of that had changed in a single day. Set course for Earth, Morrison ordered, and send a priority message to High Command. Tell them that Operation Nightfall is complete. Tell them the age of humanity being victims is over. Commander Alex Turner entered the new course into his navigation system. Captain, what should we tell Earth about what we learned today? Morrison thought about the question. The Retribution had been built to save humanity, but it had done more than that. It had shown that when humans were pushed far enough, they did not just fight back. They became something new, something that could change the rules of reality itself. Tell them that we discovered something important, Morrison said. When humanity works together with one purpose, when we use all of our intelligence and determination, we can build things that seem impossible. We can become more than what we were. The Retribution began to fade from normal space, becoming a shadow between dimensions once again. As it disappeared, the colonists on Epsilon Colony continued to watch the sky. They knew that somewhere out there, a ship built from human will and powered by human dreams was protecting them. Across the galaxy, alien civilizations began to understand a new truth. Humanity was no longer the weak species they had been hunting. They had evolved into something that could not be conquered, could not be destroyed, and could not be ignored. The age of human weakness was over. The age of human strength had begun.